Elohim Habaim. Blessings on you all.
And you too.
For unto us a child is born. A son will be given to us. The government will be upon his shoulder. And his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, my Father of eternity and Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and shalom there will be no end. On the throne of Elohim, on the throne of David, and over his kingdom to establish it and uphold it through justice and righteousness, from now until forevermore. He was born in the humblest of settings, yet heaven above was filled with the songs of angels. His birthplace was the cattle shed, yet a star brought this rich and noble from thousands of miles away to worship him. His birth was contrary to the laws of life, and his death was contrary to the laws of death. Yet no miracle is greater than his birth, and his life, and his death, and his resurrection, and his teachings. He had no cornfields or fisheries, yet he spread the table for 5,000 and had bread and fish to spare. He never stood on expensive carpeting, yet he walked on the waters and they supported him. His crucifixion was the crime of crimes, yet from Elohim's perspective, no price, no less a price, could have been made possible for our redemption. When he died, few mourned his passing, yet Elohim hung a black cape over the sun. Those who crucified him did not tremble at what they'd done, yet the earth shook under them. Sin never touched him. Corruption could not get hold of his body. The dust, the soil that was reddened with his blood could not claim his dust. For over 3 years he preached his gospel. He wrote his book. In fact, he wrote no book himself, but there was much written about him. He had no headquarters, and he built no organization, and he had no jetliners. Yet he got the message across in 2,000 years. And 2,000 years later, he's the central figure of human history, the perpetual theme of all his speaking, the pivot around which the ages resolve. The calendars are in his name, and the only redeemer of the human race. That is Yeshua HaMashiach, our Lord. And for many of us, we recognize that on the first of Nisan, because he's the new beginning. He's the beginning and the end, as was when God spoke to his people and said, this month will be the beginning of your calendar, so that you remember who I am and what I've done for you and the freedom I've provided you in taking you out of the world. Be in the world, but not of it. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it. Let's rise together. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed is his name and his glorious kingdom for all eternity. And you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And these words which I am commanding you today are to be on your heart. You are to teach them diligently to your children, and to speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Bind them as a sign on your hands, and they are to be frontlets between your eyes, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the entire Torah and the prophets hang on these two commands.
That's good. Let's sing, clap, and dance. Then he's coming back.
Yeah.
That's good. Some days you wish he'd come back more than other days. Amazing grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound words on a page, Lord. It is amazing.
Just encourage you to really just thank Him. Just speak out your loved ones right now. Just, He loves you.
Thank you, Lord.
He loves us.
Praise you.
He came for us.
Yes, thank you.
Brought us freedom,
Hallelujah.
life, wholeness.
Your kindness.
Hallelujah.
Your faithfulness. Your majesty.
Oh,
Ruler of heaven and earth.
oh. One of the big things this morning is about, we read about His glory. Fill the tabernacle.
Yes, Father, we say, ask by your special favor, that we believe it's a gift from you, oh God. You're not saved for the good things that we have done, and nor we boast, Father. We just thank you. Thank you, Yeshua. We love you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, let Him touch. Let Him touch right this morning.
Thank you for healing power. Thank you. Presence.
You're wonderful.
Appreciate it.
You're wonderful. Right. You're wonderful.
Amen.
I'll share our readings this morning about He assembled. Vayak'hel. Double banger. It's and the third day, which talks about counting, counts the cost. Yeshua said, count the cost. So it's very applicable always. It's important that we count the cost before we start a project. And God certainly did that when He started you and me. He knew the flaws that were going to occur, but He persevered anyway. Isn't that wonderful?
Is there humming? Who's the humming? Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Now, you can't? Thank you very much. Now Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month will mark the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year for you. Chapter 15. 35. 35. 1 to 21. Then Moses assembled all the congregation of Bnei Israel and said to them, these are the words which Adonai has commanded you to do. Work is to be done for 6 days, but the 7th day is a holy day for you, a Shabbat of complete rest to Adonai. So he's actually given that to us as a day of rest. He's not saying you have to have it. He says this is good for you. Whoever does any work then will die. And I think that's literal, I think if we work a 7-day week, it's not good for us. No. Do not kindle a fire in any of your dwellings on Yom Shabbat. Moses also said to all the congregation of Bnei Israel, this is the word of which Adonai commanded, saying, take from among you an offering for Adonai. Whoever has a willing heart, let him bring Adonai's offering, gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet cloth, fine linen and goat hair, ram skins dyed red, seal skins and acacia wood, oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil and for the sweet incense, onyx stones and setting stones for the ephod and for the breastplate. God liked things that were good. And he says we can too. Let every wise-hearted man among you come and make everything that Adonai has commanded, including the tabernacle, its tent and its coverings, its clasps and its boards, its crossbars, its pillars and its bases, the ark and the poles, the atonement cover and the curtain square, the table and its poles, with all of its utensils, along with the bread of the presence. Also the menorah for light with its utensils, its lamps and the oil of the light, the altar of incense and its poles, the anointing oil, the sweet incense and the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle, the altar of burnt offering with its grating of bronze, its poles and all its utensils, the basins and its stand, the hangings of the courtyard, the pillars of their bases and the curtains for the gate of the courtyard, the pegs of the tabernacle and of the courtyard, along with their cords. See, God is pretty detailed, and he's detailed in our lives too, which is a pretty cool thing. The woven garments for ministering in the holy place, the holy garments for Aaron, the Kohen, and for his sons to minister as Kohanim. Then all the congregation of Bnei Israel departed from before Moses, everyone whose heart stirred him. See, God isn't saying you must. He's waiting for you to respond and let him stir your heart. Everyone whose heart stirred him and everyone whose spirit was willing came and brought Adonai's offering for the work of the tent of meeting and for all its service, as well as for the holy garments.
Reading from Exodus 36. So Beth-El and Untitled are to work, along with every wise-hearted man in whom Adonai has placed insight and understanding, to know how to perform all the labour for the service of the sanctuary, according to everything Adonai has commanded. Then Moses called Beth-El and Untitled and all the wise-hearted men in whose minds Adonai had set wisdom, along with everyone whose heart stirred him up to come do the work. They received from Moses the entire offering that Bnei Israel had brought for the work of the service of the sanctuary to build it. They brought free will offerings to him morning after morning. Then all the skilled men who were doing all the work of the sanctuary came, one by one, from the work he was doing, and said to Moses, the people are bringing much more than enough for the work of this construction that Adonai has commanded to be done. So Moses gave an order, and they proclaimed it throughout the camp, saying, let neither man nor woman make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary. So the people were restrained from bringing more. For the work material they had was sufficient for all the work, with much left over. So all the wise-hearted men among them did the work. They made the tabernacle with 10 curtains of finely twisted linen, along with blue, purple, and scarlet, with cherubim, the work of a skilled craftsman. Thanks. The length of each curtain was 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain was 4 cubits. All the curtains had one measure. Then he coupled 5 curtains to one another, and the other 5 curtains he also coupled together. He made 4 loops on the edge of the curtain that was outermost within the first set. He did the same along the edge of the curtain that was outermost in the second set. He made 50 loops in one curtain and 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that was in the second set, so that the loops were opposite to one another. Also, he made 50 clasps of gold and coupled the curtains one to another with the clasps, so that the tabernacle was one. And then dropping down to verse 35. Then he made the curtain of blue, purple, scarlet, and finely twisted linen, along with the cherubim, the work of a skilled craftsman. He made 4 pillars of acacia and overlaid them with gold, having golden hooks, and he cast 4 silver bases for them. Then he made a parakeet for the entrance of the tent of blue, purple, scarlet, and finely twisted linen, the work of a colour weaver. Also he made the 5 pillars with their hooks, and overlaid their capitals and bands with gold, along with their 5 bronze bases.
I'm one of those pop-up guys, you know. It's all good. I'm envious of this guy, he's pretty clever. Beth-El also made the ark from acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and a cubit and a cubit and a half high. It's too easy. He overlaid it with pure gold inside and out, and made a crown of gold for it all around. He cast 4 golden rings for it, in the 4 feet, 2 rings on one side and 2 on the other. He also made poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. When he put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry the ark, he made an atonement cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide. Then he forged 2 cherubim of gold. He didn't forget a thing, this guy, from hammered work at the 2 ends of the atonement cover. 1 cherub at one end and 1 cherub at the other. He made the atonement cover from a single piece, with the cherubim on the 2 ends. So the cherubim spread out their wings on high, overshadowing the atonement cover with their wings, and their faces to one another, and the faces of the cherubim toward the atonement cover. This was really a work that was unprecedented, and this guy obviously had talent to the end. Verse 17. Usually craftspeople and stuff stand on the shoulders of other people. This guy just inspired him. Then he made the menorah of pure gold, of hammered work, even its base, its stem, its cups, its bulbs, and its flowers were one piece with it. There were 6 branches going out to the sides, 3 branches out of one side and 3 branches out of the other. 3 cups made like almond blossoms were in one branch, a bulb within a flower, and 3 cups made like almond blossoms in the next branch, another bulb within a flower. It was just so for the 6 branches going out of the menorah. Also within the menorah were the cups made like almond blossoms, bulbs and flowers, with a bulb under 2 branches of one piece, and a second bulb under the 2 branches of the other piece, and a bulb under 2 branches of a third piece. The 6 branches extended out of it. So specific. Their bulbs and their branches were one piece with it, an entire hammered work of pure gold. He also made the 7 lamps along with tongs and censers of pure gold. He made them from a talent of pure gold, along with all the pieces. He made the altar of incense from acacia wood, a cubit long and a cubit wide, squared, and 2 cubits high. The horns were one piece within. When he overlaid it with pure gold on top, on the sides, all around, and over its horns, he made a crown of gold for it all around. He made 2 gold rings for it underneath the crown, on 2 sides as holders for poles in order to carry it. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. Then he made the holy anointing oil. See, this guy was talented in so many facets. And the pure incense of sweet spices, the blend of a perfumer.
He then made the altar for burnt offering from acacia wood. It was square, 5 cubits long, 5 cubits wide, and 3 cubits high. He also made the horns on the 4 corners from one piece and overlaid it with bronze. Then he made all the utensils for the altar, the pots and the shovels, the basins, the forks and the fire pans. He made all the utensils from bronze. He also made a bronze grating net for the altar, under the ledge around it, reaching halfway up. He cast 4 rings for the 4 ends of the bronze grating to be holders for the poles. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with bronze. Then he put the poles into the rings on the sides of the altar to carry it, and he made it hollow out of boards. He made the basin and the base from bronze, with mirrors for the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And verse 21. These are the accounts of the tabernacle of the testimony, as they were recorded according to the commandment of Moses, by the service of the Levites, under the hand of Ithamar, son of Aaron the Kohen, Beth-El, son of Uri, son of of the tribe of Judah, made all that Adonai commanded Moses. Along with him was Oholiab, son of Ahishamach, of the tribe of Dan, a craftsman, a skillful workman, and a weaver of colours, in blue, purple, scarlet, and fine linen. The entirety of the gold that was used for the work of the sanctuary, including the gold of the offering, was 29 talents and 730 shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel. The silver from those numbered from the congregation was 100 talents and 1,775 shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel. That is, a beker, or half a shekel per head, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, for everyone who was recorded from 20 years old and upward, for 603,550 men. The 100 talents of silver were for casting the bases of the sanctuary and the bases for the inner curtain, 100 bases for 100 talents, a talent for each base. The 1,775 shekels he made into hooks for the pillars, overlaid their capitals, and made bands for them. The bronze from the offering was 70 talents and 2,400 shekels. With it he made the bases for the entrance of the tent of meeting, the bronze altar, the bronze grating, all the utensils for the altar, along with the bases of the courtyard all around, the bases for the gate of the courtyard, as well as all the pegs of the tabernacle, and the pegs for the courtyard all around.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. And I marked my Bible reading this morning with gold. It was the only thing I thought was appropriate for something like this. Gold and bronze and all these amazing things. And we heard in chapter 36 where the people came forward so willingly with all the materials for this offering to God that he required, that they exceeded his requirements. And I thought that was so telling. We should be also trying to exceed God's expectations. Amen? So, reading from 39, chapter 1, verse 1. Next, they made woven garments of blue, purple, and scarlet for ministering in the holy place. They made the holy garments for Aaron, as Adonai commanded Moses. He made the ephod of gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and finely twisted linen. They hammered the gold into thin plates and cut it into threads to work it in with the blue, purple, and scarlet. Within the fine linen, the work of a skillful craftsman. Then they made shoulder pieces for it, joined together at two ends. The artfully woven band on the ephod with which to gird it was of the same piece and the same kind of workmanship, gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and finely twisted linen, as Adonai commanded Moses. They placed the onyx stones enclosed in settings of gold, etched with the engravings of a signet seal, according to the names of Bnei Israel. He put them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod to be memorial stones for Bnei Israel, as Adonai commanded Moses. He made the breastplate, the work of a skillful craftsman, like the work of the ephod, gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and finely twisted linen. It was square and folded doubled, a span long and a span wide. They mounted within it 4 rows of stones. A row of ruby, topaz, and emerald were the first row. The second row were a turquoise, a sapphire, and a diamond. The third row were a jacinth, an agate, and an amethyst. And in the fourth row were a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. They were enclosed in fittings of gold within their settings, and the stones corresponded to the names of Bnei Israel, like the engravings of a signet seal, each one according to its name for the 12 tribes. Going to verse 24. They also made on the hem of the robe pomegranates of blue, purple, scarlet, and twisted linen. It's a familiar pattern. Then they made bells of pure gold and put the bells between the pomegranates on the hem of the robe all around between the pomegranates. A bell and a pomegranate, then another bell and a pomegranate, all around on the hem of the robe to minister in as Adonai commanded Moses. Then they made the sashes of fine linen, woven work for Aaron and for his sons, the turban of fine linen, the headwear, the linen undergarments of finely twisted linen, along with the tunic of checkered work in blue, purple, and scarlet, work of a colour weaver, as Adonai commanded Moses. Finally, they made the plate of the holy coronet from blue gold, from pure gold, and wrote an inscription on it, like the engraving of a signet seal, holy to Adonai. They tied to it a blue thread to fasten onto the turban above, as Adonai commanded Moses. So all the work of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, was finished. Bnei Israel did everything according to what Adonai had commanded Moses. They did it just so.
Then Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "On the first day of the first month, we will set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. You are to put the ark of the testimony there and screen off the ark with the curtain. Then bring in the table and set it in order, the bread that's on it. Bring in the menorah and light its lamps. Set the golden incense altar in front of the ark of the testimony and hang the curtain over the entrance of the tabernacle. Set the altar of burnt offering before the entrance of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. Set up the basin between the tent of meeting and altar and put water in it. Set up the courtyard all around and hang the curtain at the gate of the courtyard. Take the anointing oil and anoint the tabernacle and everything within it, and consecrate it along with all of its furnishings, and it will be holy. Also, you are to anoint the altar of burnt offering with all of its utensils and consecrate the altar. The altar will be most holy. Then you are to anoint the basin along with its base and sanctify it. Bring Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the tent of meeting and wash them with water. Put the holy garments on Aaron, anoint him and consecrate him, so that he may minister to me as Cohen. Also bring his sons and put tunics upon them. You are to anoint them as you did their father, so that they too may minister to me as Cohen. Their anointing will be for an everlasting priesthood throughout their generations. Moses did so, just as Adonai had commanded him. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of Adonai filled the tabernacle. Moses was unable to enter into the tent of meeting because the cloud resided there, and the glory of Adonai filled the tabernacle. Now whenever the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, Bnei Israel went onward throughout all their journeys. If the cloud was not taken up, then they did not move out until the day that it was. The cloud of Adonai was on the tabernacle by day, and a fire was there by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys.
So detailed. We're going to sing a song called Fix My Eyes. That the Lord would help us keep our eyes on him, especially in these days. Thank you, Kevin.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Okay, we're reading from 1 Kings chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, then down to 40 and to 50. This is all about now the temple. And Sovereign Shlomo sent and brought Hiram from Solomon. He was the son of a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a son of Zor, a bronze worker. And he was filled with wisdom and understanding and skilled in working with all kinds of bronze work. So he came to Sovereign Shlomo and did all his work. Now, verse 40. And Hiram made the pots and the shovels and the bowls. And Hiram completed doing all the work that he was to do for Sovereign Shlomo on the house of Yahweh. The 2 columns and the bowl-shaped capitals that were on top of the columns, and the 2 networks covering the 2 bowl-shaped capitals which were on top of the columns, and the 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network to cover the 2 bowl-shaped capitals that were on top of the columns, and the 10 stands, and the 10 basins on the stands, and the 1 sea, and the 12 oxen under the sea, and the pots, and the shovels, and the bowls. And all these utensils which Hiram made for Sovereign Shlomo for the house of Yahweh were of polished bronze. The Sovereign had them cast in clay in the district of Yarden, beyond Sukkot and Sarethan. And Shlomo left all the utensils unweighed, because they were many, nor was the weight of the bronze searched out. So Shlomo made all the utensils of the house of Yahweh, the altar of gold, the table of gold on which was the showbread, or bread of presence, and the lampstands of refined gold, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left in front of the speaking place, with the flowers and the lamps and the snuffers of gold, and the basins and the snuffers and the bowls and the ladles and the fire holders of refined gold, and the hinges of gold, both for the doors of the inner house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the house of the Hekal. Now, I did a quick calculation, but I was wrong, because I found that the pillars were actually hollow with 3-inch wall. Now, if it would have been a solid column, each column would have weighed 300 tons. That's what they were hollow.
What's 300 tons for Samson to pick up? Nothing. I want to explain, it's 2 weeks now I've appeared before you with sunglasses. I am not a spy for God. I am not the Mossad, or even more so the Shin Bet, if you know what the Shin Bet is. I'd say they're the muscle, the Mossad are the brains. I've had trouble sleeping, my eyes are burning, and the light is really bothering me. And these are reading glasses, so just so you know that I'm not just posing. So thank you for understanding. Marcus asked me, he put on the sunglasses to talk to me so we could speak in sunglasses. Now, when the Kohanim came out of the holy place, the cloud filled the house of Adonai, so that the Kohanim could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of Adonai filled the house of Adonai. That's exactly where Heather's reading finished. Moses couldn't enter into the tabernacle because of the glory. And I kept having this picture of Moses trying to fight his way in. Was the light so bright, or was he down on his face? Or was he just smart enough to know not to draw near because he would die? And then Solomon spoke. Adonai said that he would dwell in the thick cloud. I have surely built you a magnificent house, a place for your dwelling forever. And the king turned his face about and blessed the whole congregation of Israel, while the whole congregation of Israel was standing. That's interesting because the Kohanim couldn't stand, but the rest of the house of Israel could stand. So it's something to think about. He said, "Blessed be Adonai, the God of Israel, who spoke with his mouth to my father David and has fulfilled his hand by saying," we'll have to come back next week to finish that part. But that's where the reading stops. That's a weird place to stop. So will God really dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven and the heavens of heavens cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built. And Ezekiel. Thus says Adonai Elohim, in the first month, in the first day of the month, take a young bull without blemish and purify the sanctuary. The Kohen will take some of the blood of the sin offering and put it upon the doorposts of the house and upon the four corners of the ledge of the altar and upon the posts of the gate of the inner court. And so you will do on the seventh day of the month for everyone who sins unintentionally or through ignorance. So you will make atonement for the house. And in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, you will have the Passover, a feast of 7 days, when matzah will be eaten.
So after this being when Yeshua showed his hand for the first time with a sign, not that I think he was happy about doing it, going by his response to his mother. But what I'm about to read, he certainly was willing to show his sign here. After this, Yeshua went down to Capernaum with his mother, brothers, disciples, and stayed there a few days. The Jewish feast of Passover was near, so Yeshua went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found merchants selling oxen, sheep, and doves, also money changers sitting there. Then he made a whip of cords and drove them all out of the temple, both the sheep and the oxen. He dumped out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those selling doves, he said, "Get these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal from your house will consume me." The Judean leaders responded, "What sign do you show us since you are doing these things?" "Destroy this temple," Yeshua answered them, "and in 3 days I will raise it up." 46 years this temple was being built, and you will raise it in 3 days? But he was talking about the temple of his body. So after he raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he was talking about this. Then they believed the scripture and the word that Yeshua had spoken.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So good to be here, right? Okay. Now, the first covenant indeed had regulations of worship and the earthly set-apart place. For a tent was prepared, the first part, in which was the lampstand and the table, and the showbread, which is called the set-apart place. And after the second veil, the part of the tent which is called most set-apart place, to which belonged the golden censer and the Ark of the Covenant, overlaid on all sides with gold, the thing he loves so much, in which were the golden pot that held the manna and the rod of Aaron that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. And above it, the cherubim of esteem were overshadowing the place of atonement, about which we do not now speak in detail. And these, having been prepared like this, The priests always went into the first part of the tent, accomplishing the services. But into the second part, the high priest went alone, once a year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the sins of ignorance of the people. The set-apart spirit signifying this, that the way into the most set-apart place was not yet made manifest, while the first tent has a standing, which was a parable for the present time, in which both gifts and slaughters are offered, which are unable to perfect the one serving as to his conscience, only as to foods and drinks and different washings and fleshly regulations imposed until a time of setting matters straight. But Messiah, having become a high priest of the coming good matters, through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, entered into the most set-apart place once and for all, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, having obtained everlasting redemption. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling the defiled, set apart for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of the Messiah, who through the everlasting Spirit offered himself unblemished to Elohim, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim. Beautiful, isn't it? And our frontal lobes have the sound reasoning, the sound judgment, and our conscience in here. So that's where we're set apart to him, like a seal in a forehead of his word and who he is. It's wonderful, isn't it? We're so blessed. And I'm dropping oil everywhere, but may we catch the oil as it falls from above every time. Blessings.
For this reason, he is a mediator of a new covenant, in order that those called may receive the promised eternal inheritance. Since the death has taken place that redeems them from violations under the first covenant, for where there is a covenant, the death of the one who made it must be established. For a covenant is secured upon the basis of dead bodies, since it has no strength as long as the one who made it lives. That is why not even the first covenant was inaugurated without blood. When every commandment has been spoken by Moses to all the people according to the Torah, he took the blood of the calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and he sprinkled both the book itself and all the people. He said, "This is the blood of the covenant which God commanded you." And in the same way, he sprinkled the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry with the blood. And nearly everything is purified in blood according to the Torah. And apart from the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Therefore, it was necessary for the replicas of these heavenly things to be purified with these sacrifices, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Messiah did not enter into the holies made with hands, counterparts of the true things, but into heaven itself, now to appear in God's presence on our behalf. And he did not offer himself again and again as the Kohen Gadol enters into the Holy of Holies. Yet after year without bloodshed, that is not the same.
Excellent. It was a really good night. And this was it, Revelations 15. It's okay. After these things I looked, and the temple of the tent of witness in heaven was opened. And out of the temple came the 7 angels, having the 7 plagues, dressed in pure, bright linen, and wearing wide gold sashes around their chests. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who live forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no one was able to enter the temple until the 7 angels, 7 plagues, were finished. Hello, yes, I'm here. I was thinking about the candelabra, the menorah. Here's a challenge for you. Read the passage on how the menorah was designed and see if you can draw it and bring it along. And we'll see if what you've drawn is the same as what everyone else has drawn. I could always put a bet on it. They'll all be different. It's actually quite a complex drawing, quite a complex design. And to actually think it through how it actually could be made. Just think, most of it was beaten out of a single piece of molten parts. Yeah, but it's fascinating. It's wow. And don't forget, it's actually slightly different. The one in the temple is actually slightly different from the one that was in the tabernacle. Okay, so they are different. And also the one in Ezekiel's temple, the third temple, which will be built, is even slightly different again. No. But have a go. See how creative your mind is. We certainly covered a lot of things today, wasn't it, in the scriptures? Exciting things. side of the comparison with Yeshua. Last week's parasha was about the census, counting. And I remember a couple of years ago, Shimshon talked about taking an account of what you have done in your lives and what you actually, and it's a good thing to sometimes do. Take an account of what you've actually done with what you have been given by God. Everyone has been given the same amount of, generally the same amount of time or life. Some are shorter, some are slightly longer. He's given us different talents. He's given us different tasks to do. And it's not about what it is that he's given us to do. It's how well we've done it, how we've responded. That's an important thing. How have we responded to what he's done for us, done in us, and he's actually given to us? And it says, I molded you and I knew you in your mother's womb from the beginning. So that part of the creation of you, the marks of what you were going to do, were already printed on in you. And you had to bring them out. It's interesting, isn't it? And I trust that when you look back on it, think about it, because it's part of it. God speaks to you at different times. That's what our conscience is about. And when God speaks to us, we need to respond. And that's why to him, the most important thing always is obedience, not the sacrifice. So have a look. Not in regret. There's never any point in regretting life. Okay? Sometimes we wander off the path a little. We do some different things, interesting things, stupid things. But God has seen that already. He knows it's going to be part of the equation. But it's what happens at the end and how you've actually managed to deliver on what he has asked you to do. Not looking at someone else, looking at what someone else has done. But each of us has a task. And that's coming through in the scriptures that we read today. Really important as well. As part of that, God reminded us that we've been bought with a price. And hence our lives are no longer our own. Sometimes it's hard to get your head around. Especially guys, you often think, I'm the provider, I'm the person that's got to carry the can. I'm the thing. Well, actually, no, not necessarily. You've got to get out of that seat, the driver's seat, and give it to God. And women, because of the way societies run, often have sometimes rolled over, and that hasn't been necessarily a good thing either. Us men should have got behind them and encouraged them. When they say they need to do something, get behind them, encourage them, so they are able to then tick off, yes, God asked me to do this, and yes, I was able to achieve it because my husband or any other man or your life, whatever, has helped you, pushed you through, encouraged you through to achieve who you needed to be. So woman, don't just roll over and play patsy. Remember, Adama or Eve, your role was to be what? Much more than that. Actually to be the man's adversary. Okay? Most people forget that part. To be the adversary, to keep them in check, to actually be the counter. Okay? So, guys, allow them to do that. And don't feel put down, don't feel intimidated either. Guys, today, one of the big things is you're not necessarily knowing where you fit in the equation as well. Well, stand up and rise up because God has placed in you the position of who He wants you to be. So stand tall and don't let society push you around on that. We learned from Moshe the importance of standing in the gap, being quick to seek forgiveness and being obedient. He actually saved the whole nation from destruction because he stood in the gap. We were again reminded that the Shabbat, the seventh day, was set aside for Adonai and all the peoples, including aliens in the land. That's an interesting term, aliens in the land, all foreigners, any of the Egyptians that came with them. To observe in perpetuity, in other words, forever, and to learn God's ways. Well, it didn't take long for the people to forget the generous guiding ways of God, did they? And then the blame game began. Took hold instead of taking responsibility for their behavior, mistakes, and sins. Remember Aaron and the calf, the golden calf? He just threw the gold in the fire and out popped the calf. You know? That's pretty cool, isn't it? How would you like to do that? Yeah, amazing. He even called it Yahweh. You know, I mean, just to atone the matter, he called it Adonai, Yahweh, God. And Adam, what did he say? She gave it to me. What a wuss. She gave it to me. Wow, yeah. When we have the shame, we should run to God, not run away. We need to run to God, not run away. Even so, we learned that the 13 attributes of God, that He is compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abundant in loving kindness and truth, showing grace to the thousands of generations, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, yet by no means leaving guilt unpunished. Today, most people like the first parts, but they don't think that there's any part of God that could actually keep us to account for what we're supposed to do. They'll get a shock. Those who don't believe that will get a fright at the end of their life. Adonai is very even-handed. He's very fair. He treated everyone the same when dealing with redemption. By the way, did you get the smell of the holy anointing oil that Yanor produced? Very delicate, very nice. Well, that's human oil. So much more, the fragrance. You sit in the presence of the Most High and let His presence flow. He's in you. Understand the importance that can only often really flow if we are holy as He is holy. So remember, we're no longer our own. Who are we serving and who's in us? Then you will really sense and know His presence. Well, this week, Parasha is about he assembled in the accounts. And it seems about a lot of repetition, doesn't it? Man alive. And I don't have to remind each of us as the readers to know that if I ask some of you what you think about as you read through the Torah readings, that your thoughts may have been, not again. We only just did that last time. The last few parashot, of the Turuma, the Tetzaveh. Well, even summarizing last week's parasha, Ketzitzi, it may have triggered the same response. But we've got to see it through different eyes. The joy of God's words that he spoke to us. Reading it, we should get inspired afresh each time we read through the Word of God. It's the way we see it. As we meditate more and more on it, we realize how less and less we know about it. And the more we need to read about it. And the more we need the Holy Spirit shine on it. But if we just leave it for the occasion, yes, then you won't get the handle on it. And it will seem boring. Because it has got to come into here. It's got to penetrate your heart. The Torah was written in a time of primarily oral culture. So guess what they had to do? They had to memorize it. Now, why is the body of believers in places like China or Nigeria so strong? It's because they've got to learn it. They've got to memorize it. They've got to get it within. That's what we need to do. Repetition is often used for emphasis or to drive home the point, to make things easier to remember. Hence the important things that were repeated a whole bunch of times in slightly different words, to make it easier to remember and to reiterate the importance to understand it from God's perspective. Not only that, within Scripture there's a whole lot of patterns. That's why it's in there as well. You want to sometimes, look at the way the Scriptures are written. Don't do it for trying to build a doctrine on it, but understand that the Scriptures are perfectly written and perfectly made, and how they're formatted, because that's how God is. Very mathematical. Sorry if you're not into maths. I am. Well, this Shabbat, which immediately precedes the biblical New Year, is called Shabbat HaKodesh, the Shabbat of the month. Now, this is significant because the month of Aviv, or Nisan, it marks the start of the month of the miracle of redemption and a new fresh start. It's God also called it Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, the beginning of the months, the beginning of the cycle of the festivals. And yes, the rabbis might have thought they did a smart thing because they shifted it to September as part of the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, because it's considered that's when earth was created, and first day of creation. But that's man's thinking. When God says something, that's what it means. And man will only get into trouble when it is in place. And if you look at through Ezekiel, I encouraged some just recently. I said, look, you know, you see the scriptures and everything that's going to happen and end times, etc. Even now, how things operate, and you know the names Easter versus Pesach. And I said, look, there's nowhere in the scriptures that it actually even the word is mentioned of Easter. It's all called Pesach. So what's your problem with calling it Pesach or Passover? Why don't you call it Passover? You know? And I said, that's what the Word of God says it is. It spells it out in the Greek and the English. Doesn't make a difference. That's what it says. So don't call it anything else, irrespective of the other things that everyone puts with it. It's just call it what it is. Then you'll actually understand the meaning behind it all and how it actually works in the patterns and understand. And then you will really get to see the agony that Yeshua went through when he died and all that he's done, and the pain of it. Then you'll actually see the full meaning. But man, do their own thing, won't they? That's why we need to keep our eyes on what the Word of God says. The beginning of the cycles of the festivals, Pesach, unleavened, counting the Omer, all very exciting. It's just as an aside, many will not understand. I really encourage you to read Ezekiel chapter 40 through to 48 if you actually want to know what it's going to be like when Yeshua returns. Okay? And if you can't get your head around the fact that there will be sacrifices again, you just have to accept that's what it says. But not for sin, but for honor, for praise. Now, the parasha commences with reiteration, again, of the importance of the observance and honor of Shabbat, Sabbath, of complete rest in Adonai. Why did God repeat this instruction? He was showing his grace and how patient he was, and that even though they sinned terribly, he was prepared to forgive them and overlook their actions and commence again. Are we glad today that he shows patience to his children, both to Israel and to us? So we know that he will be patient with us when we say and do things that don't glorify him. This reading tradition would tell us that also institutes the reason why we gather to hear the Torah on the Shabbat. It also emulates what Yeshua's practice was in gathering with others to hear and participate in the readings of the Torah, and indeed read it aloud to those who assemble. It's interesting that the Shabbat instructions are in the same chapter with the building chapter. Some suggest that this is because Elohim is explaining what not to do on Shabbat by telling what the Israelites were instructed to do in their work of constructing the tabernacle. Since God rested from his work, and what kind of rest he took is illustrated by explaining what the work was that the people of Israel did. Some say because the children of Israel, they built, they dyed cloth, they produced items and craftsmanship. And hence these are some of the things as a result that we should not do on Shabbat. One of the things, of course, is an interesting one, that guess when the sacrifices were made? Now, they were the best butchers in the world. Guess when the most sacrifices were made? And that was work. But God okayed that. That was for God. You know, some people say, oh, goodness gracious, this is hypocrisy in the greatest degree. No, it's God's way, God's understanding. And it's to whatever his pleasure, rather than our pleasure. So it must have been a big job to clean up always. Wow. So anything you do it unto the Lord. You can examine the scriptures and see that it is in your life that contributes to work which you can abstain from on the Shabbat. It didn't quite make sense, I wrote that a bit late. Anyway, this rest is for your own spiritual and physical and emotional and mental well-being. And as the psalm states, it restores my soul. It restores my soul. It's so important. These concepts of Shabbat that Adonai instructed first in Genesis 2 in the work of the children of Israel, they sit side by side as an illustration of love. Adonai created in the midst of the universe a home for people he loved, his people. The children of Israel created a home in the midst of the earth for a God that they loved. It's Adonai, Elohim. It's interesting too that Exodus 35 verse 30, Moshe says, see, Adonai is called by name, Beth-El, to actually undertake the work. Because he has us, each of us, to do specific roles, specific things. And it's really important that whatever he's given you to do, you've got to give it your best shot. Do the best you can do, best you know how. Don't look at anyone else. Don't look at anyone else in terms of whether you think they're compensated more for it or you're not, or etc. But I do encourage you to, no harm asking the boss to get an increase. It's always good if you can. But don't forget, you're actually not working for them. You're actually working for God. Okay? Everything you do, you're actually working for God. And whatever you do it well, because they look at you as a representative of God. He was a gifted man, a very gifted man, and God chose him to build the tabernacle. He was wise, and from the same tribe as David, who actually wanted to build the house, but his son was given this instructions. In Exodus 36, verse 1, says another man is mentioned who also worked with Beth-El. His name was Aholiab, which actually means father's tent, and actually suggestive of light or enlightenment. It's interesting that Eliab was working in the shadow or alongside Beth-El, and his name meant light, as mentioned. However, both men, as are we actually work in the shadow of the Most High. Nothing we do or do of ourselves that he didn't actually give us the ability to do. And that's what you need to understand, is don't use false humility. You know, if someone says you've done a great job, don't say, oh, it's not me, that's not me. Well, it is, because it's God who's created you. Be nice about it and accept the thing, but then say, use it as an opportunity. So, well, actually, God help me through it. He's actually helped me in this position. And that gives the true humility, not false humility. Okay? So accept praise. Okay? It's an important thing, because it's not just for you. It's for the person that's actually giving it. Okay? I don't understand that necessarily. But it's really important to understand that when people speak things out and you accept it, then it does something for them in their spirit. Moshe then moves on to the passing of God's command to take up a contribution, free will offering. Everyone whose heart stirred and everyone whose spirit was willing came and brought Adonai's offering. As an aside, some rabbis have interpreted 36:3. They brought free will offerings to him morning after morning, as meaning all the offerings were brought in 2 days. You're free to interpret it actually as you want to. But the generosity of the Hebrew people is reiterated in Brit Hadashah, 2 Corinthians 9, which talks about cheerful giving, sowing, reaping. Rabbi Shaul found it important enough to raise the issue in verse 5. So I thought that maybe it's necessary to urge the brothers to go to you, he says, and arrange ahead of time your generous gift that he had promised beforehand, so that it would be ready as a gift and not as an extortion. And I add, not given under emotional stress or duress. And for us, we really appreciate the giving that people give to Beth-El. Many of you have considered ahead of time to give. And you bring your offerings here or set up internet banking. We see that it's truly a gift of obedience. We say very little about offerings, so as never to be accused of extorting anyone for money. However, it would be remiss to us not talk about giving, as the scriptures talk about giving, tithing. It's interesting, I was talking to someone just recently that we were talking about tithing. I said, do you realise that every third year you're supposed to get your family together and go and have a big party on your tithe? Oh, that's a new approach to it. You know, there's a number of tithes it talks about in Scripture. Yeah. So, but God is interested. God is interested in what we do. He's interested in what we do with our money. In fact, the Scriptures talk 800 times about it. It talks about the blessings that do come from giving. And it's more about the generosity of our hearts than anything else. Because that's what he wants to see. Because he's given everything. Yeshua talks about it in 11 of 39 parables. And actually 15% of his messages actually talk about money. Mainly to ensure that it doesn't captivate you. That's one of the big things, to make sure it doesn't captivate you. I guess the challenge for me today is, what is your theology on money? What is your thinking of money? How do you deal with it? Are you obedient in what God has asked of you? Are you generous? How do you manage giving? Contributions made with a glad heart, an obedient heart, knowing that, like the widow, as she gave in Brit Hadashah, that Yeshua watches to see our actions and our heart. It's important to actually realize that for the work of the kingdom, giving is important as we actually can continue to help those in the community and around us collectively. So often we can collectively do more than just individually. And it was great that the giving towards the Purim. It's good. You're able to bless the Yedidya project in Israel. But also looking at other poor folk, people who can't survive for themselves or can't care for themselves. Really encourage you to give towards them. So collectively we can actually help provide, especially believers. I mean, no one likes to ask for money. But sometimes really encourage you, if you see someone who is in need or down, just raise the question gently. Don't be afraid. You know, so it's between us. I sense you have a need, or don't be, you know, I just want to make sure that you are okay. Okay? New Zealanders are very private and not very good at opening up about their needs. And we encourage you to sense it and look for it. Ask the Holy Spirit to actually guide you in that area so that you can bless others and meet their need. Is that Yeshua, what did Yeshua say? To those, he said, I did this in my name, I did this in your name, and he says, what did he say? He said, well, when did you provide for the poor? When did you go and visit me in prison? When did you go and do this? When did you go and do that? So we need to read that as believers, as his disciples, to make sure that we are in tune with it. Okay? Really important. We're his disciples. Let's follow in his ways and footsteps. Remember that we were bought with a price by Yeshua, and hence everything that we have is his. Well, it must be around 12 weeks, he said that 3 times. So there you go. In our scripture reading this week, we see the continuation of last week's portion regarding what we are to do with the treasures that God has entrusted to us. First, Adonai addresses the physical treasures. And it says, and Moshe spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, this is the word which Adonai has spoken to you. Take from yourself a contribution to Adonai, every generous heart, let him bring it to the Lord's contribution. Gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, scarlet material, fine linen, goat's hair, ram's skin, porpoise skins. Not sure you're allowed to take those these days. And acacia wood, and oil for lighting, spices for oil, for the anointing oil, the fragrant incense, the onyx stones, the setting stones, the ephod, and the breastplate. And the important principle here is that each person is to give that which he is from his heart. The motive for giving should not be what we receive in turn, but rather simply to honor him. Honoring him will bring great joy. The second thing that he addressed is each person's talent. We were talking about it before. Every wise heart among you shall come and make all that Adonai has commanded. What are you compassionate about? What are you good at? What's your gift? what talent has God blessed you with. Don't forget, to him, they're all equal. I was looking at some countries, they actually, for many years, even in Israel, they used to call those people collecting rubbish, called garbiologists. And they got paid very well. Why? If you've got a clean, healthy place, you've got a healthy nation. But most people would kind of look down and think, oh man, what a lowly task. Oh, in God's terms, they're the same. Unfortunately, you may not get the same compensation on some of the roles, but in essence, God's terms, interesting. Those are the things we should actually be concentrating on when we talk about discrimination, about this and that. We should actually be more about those type of issues and things than some of the issues that get raised today. Society argues about. Are you using what God's given you to advance the kingdom of God in his name, or for your own kingdom? In our portion we can see that and learn that God has blessed us, each of us, with treasure. The question is, what are we doing with that which God has entrusted us? I love to read the way the Israelites responded to God's call. So, and all the wise men who were doing all the holy work came, each from the work which he was performing. And they said to Moshe, the people are bringing much more than enough for the construction work, which Adonai commanded to perform. And so Moshe issued a command, and a proclamation was circulated. Let neither man nor woman any longer perform work for the contributions of the sanctuary. Enough's enough. Thus the people were restrained from bringing any more. With everything they had sufficient. That's simply amazing, isn't it? Because the Israelites understood that Adonai had actually given them everything. They gave from their heart. The results were incredible. And God really wants us to understand how important it is that we actually live sold out, not half-hearted, fully equipped and clothed as priests and living of the living God, living holy lives, which can only occur once we've counted the cost. We repented from our sins. We've become born again in Yeshua, buried through the mikveh, baptism, being filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and continue to live and walk daily as his disciples. Hence Yeshua said, be holy as I am holy. For the Ruach has spoken to you about so if the Ruach has spoken to you about these aspects, ask the person beside you to help you and to pray with you. When Moshe spoke, he assembled the people and made it very clear that these were Yahweh's words, not his. The Israelites who entered into the covenant with Adonai Elohim to do what he commanded, they were not expected only to listen to the message, they were expected to follow through with it, to apply it to their lives, turning from their former ways. Likewise, you and I must not just be hearers of the word, we're to also do it, do what he's commanded you and me individually to do. It says, prove yourselves doers of the word and not merely hearers who delude themselves. That's in James 1:22. If we think that we know what the Word of God is, just because we've heard it, read it, or memorized it, then we still deceive ourselves. We know that the Word, when we are doing it by walking in obedience to God's commands, we must give feet to it. In the same way Yeshua said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And the last part, of course, was when we were talking about the glory of God. It says, but we all, with unveiled face, beholding as a mirror the glory of Adonai, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from Adonai, who is the Spirit. Notice that God's glory didn't come when they began the work on the tabernacle, but when they completed what God actually required of them. Beginnings are often easy. Have you found that? When we're fired up by enthusiasm and zeal, we can undertake almost anything. When we're fired up by enthusiasm and zeal, repeating myself. But it takes endurance. Life is a marathon. It takes endurance to make it to the end. And when we complete the work that we receive, we will receive the blessing. When we complete the work He's asked of us. Completing our work doesn't mean that all the loose ends have been tied up, or that there is nothing left to do. It means that we have done what God specifically asked of each of us to do. We know that from this week's parasha, that once the work is finished, not only does the blessing come, but also the glory of God that filled the tabernacle. And when Moshe finished building it, that's what fell. In the same pattern, Yeshua declared how he had completed his work and brought glory to the Father. And Elohim wants the honor of his name protected. He guards it jealously. And in the end, after we bring our works to completion, may we receive the blessing and hear his words. Well done, good and faithful servant. May we also be able to declare, like Apostle Shaul, I have fought the good fight. I've finished the race. But more importantly, I have kept the faith. I've kept the faith. I've kept his faith. I am in him. And no one, no matter what is going to happen in society today, there's some interesting things that are happening around. Keep your eyes focused on him. Keep your eyes focused on his word. Don't be swayed by all the things you hear or around about the place. And make sure that you're in tune with the Ruach HaKodesh and speak to him about everything. Let your heart not be troubled. Right? In all your ways. Acknowledge him. And stay in him. And then you will have shalom. You will have his peace. Okay? It's really important. Stay focused on him. Because there's going to be a lot of things coming up, as we know, prior to his return. It can distract us. We could lose our way. And if you see someone starting to lose their way, We talked about it on the way this morning. The scripture says an interesting point. If we don't say anything to them, their blood is on our heads as believers. That's a pretty hard thing to hear. Think, what, am I responsible for everyone around the place? No, you're not. You are responsible for one another, ensuring that you keep each other not on your account in a nice way, but you actually have a care as a fellow brother or sister to see that they too will remain in the book of life. And that is what we need to do. And that's what it means when Yeshua says, love one another. We're not talking about neighbours. He says, and you get the extra commandment, the only extra commandment he gave was love one another. In other words, each other, the brethren, as I have loved you. And that means caring for them in every aspect. I know you'll do it because you're amazing people. Shabbat shalom. As is our custom, if you'd like to all rise and get together.
Ishti, Roy. יברך אדוני וישמרך, יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך, יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישים לך שלום. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. So we're going to learn a new phrase today. Repeat after me. Kashe, Elohim, Evarech, Kulenu, Kulanu. And may the Lord bless all of us. Amen.